Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back in time to a city of domes, incense, and alley cats. Constantinople, capital of the Byzantine Empire. You're waking up on a straw-stuffed mattress in a room lit only by the dull orange flicker of an oil lamp. The air is thick with yesterday's hearth smoke and the slightly sour tang of fermented grain. Somewhere down the street, a rooster is very confidently announcing the wrong time. Your neck aches, the floor creaks, and breakfast is calling, but not in any way you'd recognize. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stretch and sit up slowly, scratching at the stiff linen tunic you slept in. Byzantines weren't huge fans of pajamas. Around you, the one-room household is stirring. Someone pokes at the hearth, blowing on yesterday's coals, which respond with a few lazy sparks and a puff of ash right into someone's face. There's a lot of coughing. This morning's first offering? A small bowl of barley porridge that's more warm than hot, thickened with goat milk if you're lucky, water if you're not, and always with just a dash of salt, because the empire taxes salt like it's powdered gold. There's no coffee, no sugar, and certainly no croissants. Just a wooden spoon, a bit of steam, and your chewing face. Barley, you soon learn, is the unofficial mascot of the Byzantine breakfast. It's cheap, filling, and grows in places that don't even particularly like plants. Historians still argue whether urban families had regular access to wheat-based options in the early centuries, or whether that was a rare luxury reserved for holidays and pretentious cousins. Either way, this barley stuff is what's available, and it's sticking to your ribs whether you like it or not. Now, you might think that with Constantinople being such a major city, literally the bridge between Europe and Asia, people would wake up to exotic feasts. And sure, if you're a merchant prince or a church official, we'll get to your olive oil-drenched delicacies in a few sections. But for the average urban family, breakfast is fuel, not flair. Outside, the sounds of donkeys clopping, children squabbling, and traders shouting echo off the stone walls. Someone's already opened a market stall, probably a grandmother selling yesterday's herbs wrapped in damp cloth. You shuffle over to a small corner table, where your breakfast companion is tearing yesterday's bread into chunks and dunking them into a ceramic cup of watered wine. Wine for breakfast? Yep. It's diluted, more like tangy grape water, and honestly safer than the local well. You sip and nod at each other like, yep, still alive. Cheers. A cat slinks past, swiping a small dried anchovy from a plate someone left unattended. You watch it disappear under the table like a furry pirate. In truth, dried fish is something of a breakfast booster in Byzantium. High in salt, high in smell, and definitely an acquired taste. If you've got a little money, you might crumble a piece into your porridge for a protein kick. If you've got a lot of money, you'd never touch it. The apartment smells of wool, garlic, and old wood smoke. Someone left out a fig from yesterday, now leathery and half squashed. You eat it anyway. The sweetness is so intense it almost rewires your brain, but it cuts through the barley mush like a surprise party in your mouth. And then comes the favorite part of any Byzantine morning: teeth cleaning. Sort of. There's no toothpaste, of course, but you might rub a twig across your teeth or chew a mint sprig if it's in season. Some used cloths dipped in vinegar or even fine sand. None of this actually helps, but it gives you something to do while staring into the middle distance and wondering whether the empire's collapsing or just taking a breather. Breakfast isn't just about food, it's about ritual. Families recite a brief morning prayer, cross themselves eastward, and mutter about the neighbor's new donkey like it's a luxury vehicle. The city smells like baking flatbread and donkey sweat. Someone outside hawks fresh eggs, meaning they were probably laid 3 days ago and carried across a sweaty market in a basket full of straw and questionable decisions. By the time you're rinsing your bowl out in a shared courtyard basin, the day has properly begun. The sun is creeping across the golden rooftops, lighting up mosaics like morning glitter. You've got barley in your belly, sour wine on your breath, and the vague sense that lunch is still several centuries away. You step out into the city, ducking beneath a low archway that always seems designed to clock the taller members of society. Your sandals flap against the uneven stones as the alleys begin to swell with movement, most of it grumbling. It's still early, but for Byzantine peasants, dawn is just a polite synonym for get to work. And with work comes breakfast, or at least, something passably edible. Out here on the edges of the city, past the outer walls and nearer the farmlands and tenement clusters, things are simpler and harder. The day's first meal isn't a relaxing ritual. It's a survival strategy. You pass a group of men with sun-leathered faces pulling loaves from a soot-darkened oven. These are yesterday's loaves, mind you, because peasants don't bake fresh every morning. These breads are dense, round, and hard enough to make you question whether they're edible or vaguely weaponized. You'll need water to soften them, or vinegar, or, if you're feeling fancy, a mix of both with some garlic and herbs steeped in. You follow your nose to one home, where steam curls lazily from a cracked clay pot. Inside, a woman stirs a mess of lentils and stale bread soaked together in broth, if you can call the grayish liquid broth. The smell is sour, earthy, oddly comforting. The kids each get a ladle's worth into chipped bowls. The adults get what's left. It's warm, it fills the stomach, and the kids haven't learned to complain, yet. Historians still argue whether this was actually considered breakfast, or just the leftovers from dinner that never really ended. Byzantine peasants didn't live by clocks or courses. They ate what they had when they could. So that bowl of lentil mush at dawn? It's breakfast if you say it is. A small boy runs by gnawing on a hunk of dried onion. Not because he likes it, but because it's available, and onions were easy to grow, dry, and store. They're basically the empire's unofficial chewing gum, though with very different consequences for your social life. You're offered a small bundle of olives wrapped in a vine leaf. They're wrinkled, slick, and extremely salty. One bite makes your jaw clench, but you don't say no. Salt preserves, after all, and these olives might be the most nutrient-dense thing you eat all week. Nearby, a teenage girl slices into a lump of curd cheese with a dagger far too large for the task. She eyes you suspiciously as she passes the slice to an elder seated on a stone bench, who eats it with deliberate, toothless dignity. This isn't romanticized village life. It's hard. Peasants live with blisters, bugs, and the gnawing certainty that next year's taxes will ask more than this year's body can give. But breakfast is still shared, still human, still a moment of togetherness before the back-breaking day begins. As you walk through a narrow dirt lane, someone waves you over to a shaded table where a drink is being passed around. A thick, pulpy liquid the color of mud. This is oxygala, a kind of sour yogurt drink, and it's as much a wake-up slap to the tongue as it is a protein hit. You take a sip, smile like you're enjoying it, and hand it back before your stomach decides to protest. There are no plates here, barely even bowls. Most meals are served communally, scooped with fingers or bits of bread. The bread acts as spoon, napkin, and napkin again. Occasionally, you'll find a family with a treasured wooden ladle passed down like an heirloom. Not because it's ornate, because it's still in one piece. You hear distant church bells ring out from a monastery on a hill, and for a moment the whole settlement quiets. People cross themselves. Someone mutters a blessing. Then, just like that, the shovels return to soil, the goats are poked onward, and a barefoot boy begins yelling about turnips. It's hard not to notice how different breakfast feels out here. There's no hurry to savor, but no rush to finish, either. It's practical, communal, and grounded in a reality where food isn't just nourishment, it's currency. If a neighbor brings over an extra egg, that's not breakfast. That's an event. One older man sits in the shade, chewing deliberately on something brown and unidentifiable. You lean closer, it's roasted chickpeas, left over from a religious feast a few days back. He offers you a handful, and you take one, chewing slowly as they crackle under your teeth. The sun climbs higher. Somewhere, a mule brays like it's doing its taxes. And you begin to realize, this meal, this moment, this steaming bowl of sour lentils and flatbread, is more than just food. It's a statement. I'm still here. I've made it to another morning. Let's see what the day brings. You pass by a small shrine at the edge of a field, where someone's left a crust of bread and a drizzle of oil as an offering. Not because the gods are hungry, but because hope, like breakfast, is a ritual that tastes better when shared. The sun isn't even above the rooftops yet, but already Constantinople is humming like 1,000 sleepy bees. You slip through a side street just wide enough to avoid a donkey, and before long, you're standing at the edge of one of the city's early morning marvels, the marketplace as it yawns awake. No grand arches or marble columns here. This is the pre-dawn version of the agora, all crates and shouting and steam. Lanterns swing from crooked posts, casting uneven halos on heaps of grain sacks and baskets bristling with vegetables that still have dirt clinging to them like they're not quite ready to be food yet. This is where breakfast gets interesting. Street vendors, grizzled, squinting, and aggressively stirring bubbling pots, are the unsung heroes of Byzantine mornings. You make your way to a stall wedged between a boot repairman and someone yelling about sesame oil. There's a large pot over an open flame, and the smell hitting your nose is earthy, garlicky, and just a little funky. Congratulations! You've found the fava soup. Fava beans, mashed into a thick paste, mixed with garlic, vinegar, olive oil, maybe a dash of mint if you're lucky. It's not elegant, but it's hot, cheap, and beloved. You're handed a chunk of bread to scoop it up with, and as you take your first bite, the steam fogs your nose and your vision, and the flavor, well, let's call it assertive, but comforting, like being gently hugged by a bean. Around you, merchants in worn cloaks and patched boots argue about cloth prices, slap coins on counters, and somehow all carry on multiple conversations at once. A boy runs past balancing a tray of sesame rings, Kaluria, on his head like a caffeinated circus act. These are your Byzantine version of bagels. Crunchy outside, soft inside, perfect for dipping or eating on the go. You snag one for a copper coin, biting into the crust with a satisfying crack. It's dry, sure, but the toasted sesame sings. Somewhere, a pigeon lands just a little too close, eyeing your bread with impolite interest. Historians still argue whether these early markets were regulated heavily in the mornings or more of a chaotic free-for-all. There are Byzantine law codes detailing weights, prices, even minimum bread sizes, but how closely those were enforced is, let's say, subject to interpretation. Still, if you shortchange someone at breakfast hour, you're likely to get a fistful of fava thrown at your head. The stalls here don't just offer food, they reflect status. One vendor sells dates from Syria, honeycombs from Anatolia, even salted duck eggs that smell like a dare. These luxuries are here, sure, but they're for those who can afford to start their morning with something sweet and imported. For everyone else, it's pulses, porridge, or pickled whatever. You pause at a cart stacked with earthen jugs. A wrinkled man with more beard than face pours you a drink called pasca, a watered-down vinegar beverage meant to wake you up and possibly remove enamel from your teeth. You sip cautiously. It tastes like a salad that got confused about its identity. But hey, it's better than warm gutter water. Marginally. Next, a woman passes by carrying a small wooden crate. You peek inside, boiled quail eggs nestled in a bed of straw. She's selling them to a merchant who buys them in bulk to reheat and resell to dockworkers later. A breakfast chain, Byzantine style. No branding, just hustle. You follow the flow deeper into the maze of stands, where the noise builds like a wave. Everywhere, people are eating while standing, walking, talking. Breakfast here isn't a sit-down affair. It's a mobile, edible negotiation with the day ahead. You watch two traders, one Greek-speaking, the other Arabic-speaking, huddle over a steaming bowl of wheat gruel laced with cinnamon. You sidle closer. It's called trigonos, a dish that's halfway between porridge and grain salad, depending on the mood of the cook and the quality of the grain. You're handed a spoon and invited to join. You do because saying no would be rude and also because, well, free breakfast. The cinnamon hits first, then a clove, maybe even a splash of date syrup if your taste buds aren't hallucinating. It's delicious. One of the men grins, gold tooth flashing. From Persia, he says. Whether he means the syrup or the spoon is unclear, but you nod solemnly like you know. By now, the market is fully awake. Dogs slink between stalls, chasing scraps. A boy accidentally spills a basket of figs, and two men argue over who gets to keep the squishiest one. You've eaten soup, bread, beans, maybe a sesame ring or two, and still, no one's asking you if you'd like orange juice. The concept of citrus at breakfast hasn't really landed here yet. You feel the city vibrate underfoot, distant carts rolling in from the harbors, footsteps pounding on stone, temple bells chiming somewhere in the haze. The smells are dizzying. Fried leeks, smoked fish, fresh herbs crushed beneath sandals. There's no sitting down for eggs and bacon. No servers in aprons, no menus, no, can I get that gluten-free? Just food made in public, shared in public, and eaten with a rhythm so fast it makes your modern brunch look like a royal banquet. And as you watch an elderly woman slowly roast parsnips over a brazier while humming a hymn, you realize something. This chaotic market isn't just where people get fed. It's where the city breathes. By now, your feet are dusted in city grime, your hands smell faintly of garlic, and you've probably consumed more beans than is medically advisable before 9 a.m. But don't get too comfortable. This next stop on our journey takes you somewhere far quieter and far more peculiar, the monastic kitchens. You trudge uphill, away from the markets and chatter, where the sounds of vendors fade and are replaced by birdsong, rustling cypress trees, and the soft toll of a bell echoing over stone walls. You've arrived at a monastery, one of hundreds dotted throughout the empire, where daily life runs not by sun or season, but by the rule of prayer. Here, breakfast follows a different rhythm entirely. It's dictated by the monastic timetable, which itself is tethered to the horologion, a cycle of prayers spread throughout the day and night. And depending on the season or the saint's calendar, you might not even get a proper breakfast. Fasting wasn't a rare occurrence. It was the default state of being. Still today, you've lucked into one of the less austere mornings. A kitchen monk greets you with a nod and a ladle. Inside the cool, vaulted kitchen, the air smells of herbs, old wood smoke, and something faintly metallic, likely the large iron pots bubbling over the fire. These monks have mastered the art of turning very little into just enough. Your bowl is filled with a warm gruel made of barley and crushed chickpeas, thickened with something you can't identify but doesn't offend the tongue. It's served with exactly 1 olive. One. But it's a good olive, plump, oiled, and likely blessed by sheer repetition. Historians still argue whether monastic breakfasts were intended for nutrition or spiritual discipline. Many of these meals are documented in monastic typica, guides that lay out rules for everything from how to stir a pot to when you're allowed to sneeze during Vespers. Some even dictate that meals should be eaten in complete silence, save for the reading of scripture. So if you're the type to hum while you chew, you may want to rein it in. You sit on a wooden bench, back straight, spoon in hand. One of the senior monks is already eating, his eyes closed, possibly from reverence, possibly from sleep. You mimic him, trying not to slurp. The gruel is surprisingly satisfying, almost nutty, and if you squint hard enough, you can pretend it's risotto. Just a really, really pious one. Nearby, a young novice breaks off a piece of spelt bread and dips it into a small bowl of oxymel, a tangy sweet mixture of vinegar and honey, used for everything from seasoning to medicinal throat gargles. It hits your tongue like lemonade having a nervous breakdown. But again, it's oddly soothing. The monk beside you coughs, then mumbles something that sounds like a blessing. You nod respectfully, mouth still full of blessed barley. In this world, even the crumbs have spiritual value. Waste nothing. Every crust matters. You resist the urge to ask for more than 1 olive. You look around and notice the kitchen's collection of herbs hanging in bunches near the window. Thyme, mint, and sylphian, or perhaps its local cousin, sway gently in the morning breeze. These aren't just flavorings, they're the monk's medicine cabinet. Many monasteries doubled as infirmaries, where breakfast could easily become a prescription. Feeling faint? More barley. Bloated? Have some cumin tea. Absolutely any issue. Drink water and pray. You're offered a second course, not because it's fancy, but because it's penitential. This one's a thin lentil broth served with, wait for it, another olive. At this point, olives are basically the anchoring characters of Byzantine breakfast, playing cameo roles in every edible narrative. You chew slowly, contemplating sainthood, or at least sainthood adjacent. Suddenly, you hear the creak of the refectory door and a barefoot shuffle. It's the monk responsible for reading scripture aloud during meals. He opens a scroll, clears his throat, and begins a passage from Basil the Great about the virtues of self-restraint. You spoon your lentils more quietly. The irony is not lost on you. One fringe theory suggests that monks deliberately overcooked everything, not for texture or taste, but to symbolically kill the indulgence in flavor. Food is function, not fun. But the moment you catch a whiff of wild oregano wafting off someone's bowl, you're not entirely convinced. Maybe monks had taste buds too. They just weren't allowed to talk about it. The meal ends not with dessert, but with a short prayer and the sound of bowls being scraped clean. Dishes are washed in cold water, no soap, just sand and ash, and returned to the shelf with military precision. You're given a linen cloth to wipe your mouth. It feels like it's been washed in sincerity and the tears of basil plants. As you rise to leave, one of the older monks places a single dried fig in your hand. A quiet parting gift, or maybe a lesson in gratitude. It's chewy, rich, and just sweet enough to make you want 3 more. But you nod in thanks, mouth full of fig and unspoken appreciation. Out the door, back into the sunlight, the silence of the monastery gives way once more to the buzz of city life. You've eaten like a monk, absorbed the serenity, and made peace with barley mush. It's not glamorous, but it's oddly grounding, like someone tucked a napkin under your soul. You're back in the city now, feet padding along the worn flagstones, and there's something about the light this time of day. It's tilted golden, bouncing off domes and rooftops like it knows a secret. You've had beans, bread, gruel, and exactly 2 olives. But your next stop promises a different kind of morning, the aristocratic household. This isn't the humble monk's gruel or the street vendor's sesame rings. Here, behind carved wooden gates and walls thick enough to keep both beggars and noise at bay, breakfast is a quieter, more curated affair. You don't knock. You're already expected. You enter a villa, sun-drenched courtyard, olive trees in pots, and a mosaic of a vaguely smug peacock underfoot. A servant in soft sandals guides you toward the dining room, where the air smells like cinnamon and smugness. The lady of the house is still in her bedrobe, reclining on a couch as though horizontal eating were a personal achievement. On the table, bowls of almonds, dishes of fresh white cheese, a pitcher of warm goat's milk infused with honey. And beside them, a strange bowl of something you're not immediately able to identify. It looks like custard, smells like rosewater, and wobbles when touched. It's olera, a type of emmer wheat porridge, but with all the budgetary limits removed. Enriched with cream, sweetened with dried fruits, and perfumed with spices from lands whose names you couldn't pronounce on your first try. You're handed a silver spoon. The good kind. The kind that screams, "I don't clean my own dishes." The porridge is velvety, warm, and slightly floral, like someone distilled the feeling of a cozy nap in silk sheets. You take a second spoonful, possibly a third. It's hard to tell when you're trying to look elegant. The man of the house eventually appears, mid-conversation about property disputes with a man who may or may not be a cousin. His hair is oiled into a polite swoop, and he's more interested in the prunes than the people. You watch him absently slice a fig, dip it in soft cheese, and pop it into his mouth without a word. This is less a meal than a daily ritual of being superior. Historians still argue whether the Byzantine elite ate their first meal early or waited until after certain religious observances. Some sources suggest a pre-prayer snack, maybe a few nuts or dried apricots, while others imply that a full breakfast could occur whenever it was most politically advantageous. Because let's be honest, even porridge tastes better when you've outmaneuvered a rival landowner. You're offered a warm cake made of semolina and something citrusy, perhaps orange zest, perhaps whatever passed for luxury in the 9th century. The texture is dense but heavenly, and it leaves a fine trail of crumbs on your fingers, which a passing servant wipes away without comment. You've officially been upgraded to ornamental guest. On a silver tray nearby, a selection of dried fruits glistens. Dates, figs, and something that looks suspiciously like candied melon. These are imported, carefully arranged, and entirely unnecessary. But isn't that the point? You sip from a small ceramic cup of kafisma, a bitter herbal concoction often confused with early proto-coffee. It's not coffee. Not even close. But it gives you a mild jolt, enough to lift your eyelids, not so much that you start quoting philosophy at breakfast. The recipe changes depending on which herb garden you're within riding distance of. Today's version tastes like roasted chicory married to licorice root after a difficult courtship. There's also gossip. Always gossip. The elite don't just eat, they speculate. You hear whispers about a bishop with suspiciously extravagant taste in boots, a foreign ambassador who thinks garlic is barbaric, and a rumor that the empress herself once requested imported saffron for her breakfast pudding. Scandalous. The table is cleared without fanfare. Linen cloths are whisked away like magic, and someone offers you a small cube of preserved quince, jewel-like and absurdly sweet. You nibble it, trying not to seem too eager, but inside your brain, small fireworks of delight are going off. This is fruit as fashion statement. One servant pours warm water over your hands from a ceramic pitcher. Another dabs your fingers dry. You wonder briefly if they do this for everyone, or just people who look slightly overwhelmed by the cheese. From the courtyard, you hear the soft coo of doves and the occasional bark of a bored guard dog. Time seems to move slower here. Breakfast isn't fuel, it's performance art. A chance to display refinement, exotic imports, and just the right amount of restraint. No one's rushing. No one's slurping beans in a bowl while walking uphill. A scroll rests on a side table. Some theological essay or political correspondence no doubt intended to accidentally impress whoever walks by. It's all part of the aesthetic. The elite breakfast isn't just about food, it's about signaling. Wealth, education, and the deeply held belief that no one in this room ever ate street soup. You stand, or rather, you're guided into standing, as a servant discreetly adjusts your tunic to ensure you don't wrinkle like a commoner. You thank your hosts, who nod with the exact amount of politeness required and no more. Then you're gently ushered out, past flowering myrtle bushes and a marble basin of floating rose petals. You step back into the public streets, full and slightly dazed. The air is different here, less perfumed, more real. But you carry with you the lingering scent of rosewater, roasted wheat, and social hierarchy. Breakfast with the elite, a slow, silent competition disguised as a meal. You step lightly now, not because you're tired, but because the cobblestones seem to hum with purpose. Downhill this time toward the port, where everything smells of salt and wood tar, and the people are less perfumed, more sun-warmed and purposeful. This is the domain of sailors, dockworkers, and merchants, those whose breakfasts must battle the elements and schedules, not polite conversation and plum jam. Here, mornings start early, like aggressively early, before the sun finishes yawning over the water. You're already late. A grizzled sailor eyes you with amused contempt as you sidestep a puddle of something that probably used to be fish. The sea's always in the background here, sloshing against the piers, gossiping louder than the market vendors. And breakfast? It's eaten with one hand, ideally while shouting over the wind. You're handed a packet wrapped in parchment-thin reed leaves. Inside, Paxamadia, twice-baked barley biscuits so hard you could shingle a roof with them. Yet they're beloved. Portable, durable, and perfect for dunking in literally anything liquid. Today, it's a mug of watered wine or perhaps sour goat whey if you're feeling particularly monastic. You try both. The wine is gently vinegared. The whey tastes like a philosophical debate about cheese. You chew and chew. Your jaw might qualify for early retirement after this. Dockside breakfasts are about what lasts. Nothing too soft, nothing too fancy. Dried mulberries, salted fish, hard cheese, and black olives. You notice olives, again, proving their dominance as breakfast MVPs of the empire. One sailor crushes garlic into a smear and spreads it on his bread like he's painting a masterpiece of defiance. Another adds crushed cumin and coriander. Cheap, aromatic ways to distract from the fact that the fish was probably dried 3 months ago and still has opinions. Historians still argue whether dockside eating habits were standardized or entirely improvised. Some suggest certain dishes were regulated by guilds. Fishermen allowed certain rations, grain porters another set. Others believe it was pure anarchy. Eat what you can, when you can, and hope it doesn't bite back. You watch as a man tosses an anchovy into his mouth, tail and all, then chases it with a sip of something strong enough to sterilize emotional wounds. He grins at you, all teeth and history. Nearby, a young boy sells hot chickpea cakes from a brazier. They sizzle with cumin and something spicy enough to wake your ancestors. You take one, bite in, and feel the warmth spread through your fingers like a sunrise in edible form. He wraps a second one for you in a scrap of waxed linen. No words exchanged. Just the universal language of, "You look like you need more food." Not everything is grimy and grizzled. You pass a Phoenician trader laying out dates and spiced honey on a slanted stall. He's selling them as breakfast invigorators, though one dock worker mutters they just make you more polite to your enemies. You try a honey-dipped fig. It's sinfully sweet, sticky enough to glue your tongue to your teeth, but undeniably comforting. A pair of Egyptian sailors joke in a mix of Greek and Coptic about who has the worst sea biscuits. One gestures toward his meal, a thin wheat pancake folded around lentil paste and pickled onions. It smells intense. You politely decline, pretending to be full, though your curiosity flutters like a sail in a crosswind. The mood down here isn't refined, but it's robust. Meals are loud, communal, full of jabs and laughter. Someone sings a song about a sea captain who mistook salted beef for his mother-in-law's cooking. A barrel top becomes a breakfast table, and 3 men pass around a pot of lukewarm lentil mash like it's sacred stew. You get a spoonful. It's oddly excellent. You begin to notice something else. A rhythm. Not of flavor, but of necessity. Foods are layered not for culinary expression but logistics. Dried fruits travel well. Hard cheese doesn't spoil in the sun. Spices cover a multitude of maritime sins. This is a cuisine of compromise, and yet it has its poetry. One fringe theory claims that dockworkers developed a kind of unwritten recipe book, passed verbally, adjusted daily, and dependent on what arrived by ship. A breakfast of chickpeas and caraway might mean a North African ship just unloaded. A sudden abundance of rice cakes? Persian traders in town. Breakfast becomes a weather report of empire. What's available, what's traveled far, what might be eaten on a crate beside a sleeping cat. A man with wind-roughened hands offers you a boiled egg, still warm, dyed reddish with onion skins and herbs. It's cracked at the bottom, slightly overcooked, but you eat it with reverence. You've had elite custards and monk mush, but something about this humble, slightly gritty egg makes you feel more awake than any honeyed goat milk ever could. As the port gears up for mid-morning chaos, carts trundle past, ropes creak, and gulls scream existential poetry from rooftops. You find yourself seated on a crate, sipping the last of the herbal wine, a few crumbs of lentil cake stuck to your sleeve. You're full, not stuffed, but satisfied in a way that sticks with you. Someone yells about a ship coming in from Trebizond, and half the crowd pivots to guess what breakfast ingredients it might bring. Dried apples? pine nuts, smoked goose. There's laughter, mock bets, and a rogue dance move. For a moment, it feels like breakfast might be the highlight of their day. And now, maybe yours too. You rise, stretch, and brush a flake of crust from your shoulder. The sea keeps whispering. The wind keeps tasting of salt. And your belly, full of things that shouldn't go together but somehow do, thanks you for not skipping breakfast. Your feet carry you inland now, away from the chaos of the docks and toward something older, quieter, and dustier. The road narrows, winding like a lazy thought past ancient aqueducts and vine-draped courtyards. You pass goats. So many goats. You wave. They ignore you. Today's breakfast? Rural. Rustic. Entirely unbothered by politics or ports. You arrive at a countryside settlement. Small houses with red tile roofs, garden patches, chickens that look like they're plotting something. The villagers are already up, of course. They've been up since stars still hung in the sky like forgotten lamp oil. You're late. Again. The air smells like damp earth, crushed herbs, and smoke from a cooking fire that's been going since before your dreams ended. An old woman, barefoot and possibly ageless, gestures for you to sit on a bench carved out of something that was once a tree and is now just splintering dignity. Breakfast here is about what you grow, what you can borrow, or what your neighbor owed you from that time you lent them a spade and didn't ask for it back. She hands you a bowl. Inside, a wheat and lentil porridge, thick and humble, with a swirl of something green, wild herbs, maybe mustard leaves, or possibly just whatever the goats didn't eat first. You sip cautiously. It's good, nutty, slightly bitter, the taste of necessity seasoned with patience. There's a basket of foraged mushrooms drying nearby, and she tosses a few into the fire to roast them, just for fun, or vengeance, it's unclear. The smell is divine, earthy, smoky, and slightly mischievous. A young boy brings over a clay jug filled with sour milk, the top bubbling slightly in a way that suggests both fermentation and danger. You drink it anyway. It's alive, but in a charming way. Mainstream historians agree that rural Byzantine breakfasts were modest, anchored in grains, pulses, and greens, often stretched with yesterday's leftovers or the occasional egg. But there's a charming chaos to the specifics. One source mentions villagers eating a mash of grape must and barley flour. Another speaks of salted turnip gruel, which sounds like a dare from a future cooking show. You're handed a slice of cold millet pie, cut from a pan that's probably older than half the empire. It's dense, subtly sweet from dried apples, and held together with olive oil and sheer willpower. You chew slowly as a rooster somewhere shouts his disapproval of your lateness. The old woman now produces what looks like a fried dough twist, covered in sesame and drizzled with something syrupy. You look at her. She shrugs. Festivals, she mutters. Apparently it's leftover from a village Saint's Day celebration. It tastes like joy remembered too late, but still welcome. There's a ritual here, but it's loose. Bread, of course, often flat, coarse, and still warm from a clay oven built into the courtyard wall. You tear it by hand, scoop up beans mashed with garlic, and wonder if this is what heaven smells like after a long rain. No plates. Just bowls passed hand to hand, and a shared understanding that breakfast is best when it comes with conversation and a breeze. A baby goat sniffs your foot. You nod at it. It disapproves of you, but only mildly. Historians still argue whether Byzantine peasants distinguished breakfast as a separate meal or simply grazed throughout the morning while working. Some say a formal break was taken. Others claim food was nibbled on the go. An apricot here, a hunk of bread there, a quick bite of pickled cabbage behind a vineyard wall. You suspect both are true, depending on whether someone remembered to build a fire. Someone passes you a fig leaf-wrapped bundle. You open it to reveal a paste of mashed chickpeas, garlic, and crushed walnuts. It's pungent, creamy, and honest in a way no elite custard could ever be. You eat it with your fingers. No one minds. A grandmother tells you, in thick dialect and with zero punctuation, a long tale about how her uncle once made wine porridge using leftover grape skins, stale barley, and divine inspiration. You don't understand half the words, but feel completely, cosmically included. Then comes the garlic yogurt. Yes, garlic. For breakfast. It's pungent, rich, and alarmingly effective at clearing your sinuses. You smear it on some crusty bread, chew, and suddenly feel capable of rebuilding a barn with your bare hands. It's not subtle, but neither is life here. There's laughter now, low, wide, unhurried. A man with one eyebrow and 3 teeth offers you a plum. You accept. It's sour, and you pretend to enjoy it, because honestly, the joy is in the offering, not the flavor. Food here is about surviving together. Not flexing, not comparing herbs flown in from Antioch. It's about keeping bellies full and hearts warm. The ingredients might be simple: lentils, onions, beans, but the combinations are endless. And each carries a story. That cabbage pie, from a recipe whispered by a nun during a siege. That grain mash, invented when the donkey got into the wheat. You sip some boiled chicory root tea. It tastes like someone dared you to like it. You kind of do. It's bitter, grounding, oddly comforting. Like a conversation with someone who doesn't sugarcoat but still braids your hair. As the sun begins to climb, the village stretches, groans, and begins to move. Tools are lifted, gardens tended, children chased. Your bowl is quietly refilled without fanfare, and you realize breakfast never really ends here. It just evolves into lunch, then a mid-afternoon snack, and eventually a story around a fire. You stand, thank your hosts with a clumsy bow, and they wave you off with hands still sticky from fig syrup and lives too full to worry about appearances. As you walk back up the path, you realize you're not just full, you're anchored. This was food with roots. And somewhere behind you, the old woman calls out, "Tell them we eat well, even when no one's looking." You walk with a newfound respect for all things mashed, for grain that refuses to be glamorous, and for garlic that shows up to breakfast with zero apologies. The road bends again. Byzantium loves a good curve, and now you're weaving through the outskirts of a monastery perched like a sleeping cat on a low, grassy hill. Stone walls. Vineyards clinging to the slopes. Bells in the distance, slow and solemn, like time remembering itself. Here, breakfast is holy, and slightly suspicious. The gate creaks open. You're greeted not by monks, but by the soft shuffle of sandals and the low murmurs of prayer from the chapel beyond. A young novice gestures silently for you to follow. You do, obviously. You're not trying to anger anyone who might be on speaking terms with divine breakfast policies. Monastic meals are governed by rules. Specifically, the Typicon, that thick, slightly terrifying book of daily schedules, prayers, and when exactly one may or may not eat boiled leeks. Everything here runs on a divine timetable, and breakfast is no exception. But first, silence. A brief morning chant echoes through the cloister, smooth and slow like honey poured over stone. You can almost taste it. Then, at last, the kitchen. A long wooden table, a handful of monks already seated, heads bowed. You take a spot at the end, unsure if you've just joined a religious order or crashed a very well-mannered breakfast club. A bowl is placed in front of you, lentils again, but finer this time, with tiny diced leeks and a hint of something smoky. Cumin, maybe. Or just centuries of piety soaked into the walls. There's bread, of course, round loaves baked by the monastery's own hands. Slightly burnt on the bottom, dusted with flour, and blessed by more than just heat. You tear off a piece and notice it's still warm. It smells like morning, and maybe a little like atonement. Historians still debate how rigidly these monastic breakfasts followed imperial dietary codes versus local adaptations. Some argue that specific monasteries created their own versions of permitted dishes based on seasonal abundance or desperate improvisation. One scholar insists a certain island monastery had a standing tradition of chickpea pancakes with sage because their abbot once had a dream about it. Others scoff. You sip from a clay cup of warm water steeped with herbs, oregano and thyme, most likely. No wine here. Alcohol was frowned upon in the mornings unless you were very old or very cold. Or both. A monk offers you a date, then half a boiled egg. It's precise, clean, humble. You're tempted to ask for salt, but reconsider. Your tongue has already been sufficiently humbled this morning. Silence continues, but it's a good kind. A restful kind. The kind where no one is trying to sell you pickled onions or explain how their brother-in-law invented new goat cheese. Just quiet chewing, slow blinking, and the occasional glance toward a dusty window where light streams in like a blessing. Monastic kitchens were often surprisingly efficient. Rainwater cisterns, communal ovens, preserved stocks of lentils, chickpeas, grains, and dried herbs. You learn that some monks practiced fermentation, not just wine, but vinegars, sour porridges, and even soy-like bean pastes introduced by travelers from eastern trade routes. One scroll fragment refers to a sour bean custard that divided a monastery so violently they rewrote the lunch schedule. One quirky record mentions a monk who believed that breakfast without garlic was spiritually thin. His brothers disagreed fervently. A compromise was reached involving roasted onions. They still don't speak of it. Back at the table, a small clay bowl of honey appears. It's dark, almost black, likely from wild thyme-fed bees. A monk gently nudges it toward you, and you scoop a tiny bit onto your bread. The flavor is sharp and deep, like a secret told once and never again. For a moment, it feels less like eating and more like remembering. There's a rhythm here, a grace. Everything done with intention, where you put your hands, how long you chew, whether your sigh is too loud. You find yourself matching their pace, chewing more slowly, not just for effect, but because, why rush? Time here is shaped differently. A novice brings out a small dish of preserved quince. It glows in the morning light, syrupy and golden. You take a bite. It's like eating a sunrise wrapped in scripture. No wonder some monks wrote hymns about fruit. Now, a monk clears your bowl wordlessly, nods once, and leaves behind a figure. Just one. You eat it in 3 bites, each more aware than the last. You're full, but also lighter. This breakfast wasn't about abundance. It was about attention. Each bite invited you to notice it, to taste the grain, the herb, the work. Even the silence had a texture. As you stand, bow slightly, and step back into the cloister, you pass a row of drying herbs: lavender, marjoram, bay leaves. They rustle in the breeze, like a recipe whispered by the wind. Somewhere, a monk coughs gently and resumes his prayer. You leave the monastery with a belly full of lentils and the distinct sense that your thoughts have been buttered with calm. No clanging pans, no shouting merchants. Just the memory of thyme honey and the quiet, unwavering company of those who eat to nourish both body and spirit. Also, you may now be addicted to sour chickpea mush. There are worse fates. You follow a dusty road down from the monastery, your thoughts still steeped in thyme honey and the hush of communal chewing. But Byzantium is nothing if not contrast. And just as you're getting used to the slow rhythm of monastic mornings, you find yourself swallowed by a different hum, not of prayer, but of productivity. You've wandered into a gynaeconitis, the women's quarters of a well-to-do Byzantine household. Quiet, yes, but not silent. There's motion here, the rustle of linen skirts, the soft clink of ceramic bowls, the occasional laughter bubbling up from a task well done, or at least not burned. You're here for a lady's breakfast. No fanfare. Just finely ground flour, strong opinions, and a healthy dose of social choreography. Women in the Byzantine Empire may not have ruled from thrones, but in the kitchens, the loom rooms, and these walled inner courts, they reigned with buttered iron. You take a seat, gingerly, on a low stool near the fire pit. A pair of sisters are already up to their elbows in dough, working on something halfway between a pancake and a flatbread. There's yogurt involved, and cheese. Possibly a grudge. One of them waves you over and hands you a plate. It holds what might be called Byzantine brunch bites by a modern influencer. Warm cheese pastries with honey drizzle, sliced olives, and a few roasted chestnuts on the side. Everything smells like something you'd never deserve, but someone's grandmother insists you need. Mainstream history notes that upper-class women in Constantinople had access to finer ingredients. Spices from Syria, almonds from Anatolia, citrus from Crete. But this isn't a banquet. This is practical, hearty, and, let's be honest, emotionally fulfilling. A young girl brings out a jug of oxymel, a tart, vinegary drink sweetened with honey. It's brisk and surprising, like a compliment from someone you thought didn't like you. You sip. You're awake now. Historians still argue whether women's domestic breakfasts were fully private or shared with younger sons and daughters. Some texts suggest the women's quarters were off-limits to all but female servants and children. Others hint at more flexibility, especially in elite or merchant households where breakfast doubled as a planning session for the day's social maneuvering. A grandmother pulls up a chair beside you, unbothered by your outsider status. She hands you a slice of semolina bread slathered with something deep purple and sweet. You ask what it is. She smiles and says, "Whatever the jar was closest to." You think it might be plum preserves spiced with cinnamon and cloves. Or maybe it's sorcery. There's chatter now, low but animated. Someone's cousin is getting married. Someone else has a rash no one wants to talk about directly. It's intimate, real. A safe space to snack and strategize. A fig tart appears, dense and sticky, and vanishes in 2 bites. You hear mention of saffron rice puddings, sometimes served to pregnant women in the mornings, to make the baby smart. Whether it works is unclear. The baby in question is now 15 and refuses to eat anything that doesn't include garlic. There's a savory turn, too. Mashed fava beans seasoned with mint and garlic oil, served on a dish made from carved alabaster. You scoop it up with torn pieces of bread and learn what it means to feel both full and flattered. One woman begins to tell a story, something about her great-aunt and a goat that refused to fast during Lent. You miss a few details but get the gist. Goats are chaos, and so is love. A curious tidbit. Byzantine upper-class women often managed complex household economies, including food preparation schedules, preserving routines, and guest entertainment. Some even kept small recipe books, handed down through generations. One fragment, preserved in a monastery archive, includes instructions for lemon-soaked chickpea fritters for ladies in mourning. A delicacy for grief, wrapped in batter. You're handed another drink, this time a mulberry juice mixed with chilled barley water. It's tangy, floral, and slightly gritty. You pretend not to notice. The woman who served it smiles with such pride that you consider asking for seconds just to be polite. In a quiet moment, someone asks if you've ever tasted quince jam with rosewater. Before you can answer, they're slicing some onto your plate. You've never been more certain that breakfast might be the kindest thing one human can offer another. And it's not just about food. It's a chance to talk, to check in, to adjust the world's sharp corners before facing the day. These women don't get to stomp through the forum or debate with scholars. But here, at this table, they are commanders of comfort, queens of the morning, and guardians of the best olives you've ever had. As the meal winds down, the bread is stashed, the leftover cheese tucked into linen cloth, and the courtyard cleared with the quiet elegance of women who've done this every day of their lives. You stand, nodding your thanks, and one of the women presses a warm pastry into your hand for the road. Outside, the sun is climbing higher, the city louder, the air thicker. But in your pocket is a soft cheese bun, and in your heart, the echo of shared laughter over figs and garlic yogurt. The pastry is still warm in your hand as you wander farther into the city's maze. Constantinople's side streets now pulsing with the clatter of hooves, sandal slap, and the occasional shout from a fishmonger already in full operatic form. But your next stop is quieter, narrower. You duck through a humble archway into a neighborhood courtyard strung with laundry, shaded by olive trees, and very much alive with the smells of frying oil and yesterday's gossip. Here, you'll sample a breakfast less grand, less orchestrated, but no less vital. This is the domain of laborers, craftspeople, dockhands, widows, scribes for hire. The working-class Byzantines. People who don't have time for six herbs or philosophical debates about leeks. People who eat with their hands and get on with their day. A family waves you in without fuss. A father sharpening a knife. A mother stirring something thick and golden in a copper pan. A child flicking seeds at a very patient chicken. You're handed a piece of barley bread straight from the hearth, smoky on the edges and still soft in the center. It's denser than anything you've had so far, as if it's bracing you for whatever awful task lies ahead, like hauling bricks or arguing with tax collectors. On the table sits a bowl of trigonos, cracked wheat boiled into a thick mush and dressed simply with olive oil, vinegar, and shredded greens. Kale, chard, dandelion. No one here uses a label maker. You spoon some into your mouth. It tastes like survival, earthy, tangy, slightly bitter, but it warms you all the way down. A little rough around the edges, maybe, but honest. Mainstream accounts often overlook the ingenuity of these modest meals, focusing instead on palace feasts and monks with 9 herb gardens. But this is where the majority lived, cooked, and made their mornings count. You watch as a neighbor tosses thin slices of salted mullet into a pan slick with olive oil and garlic. The fish hisses its complaints, but crisps beautifully. Breakfast fish, less fancy than it sounds. More like a necessary protein bump before hauling amphory or chiseling marble all day. Historians still argue whether working-class Byzantines generally ate twice a day or grazed constantly on small, prepared items. Some suggest urban dwellers relied heavily on street food stands offering morning bites, cheese rolls, stuffed grape leaves, or fried chickpea patties. Others point to archaeological finds of small household braziers and storage jars as evidence of robust home cooking, even in cramped quarters. A boy appears with a small clay cup of pasca, diluted vinegar water. It's shockingly refreshing. You're told it clears the eyes and keeps the brain sharp, although your eyes are still blurry from the fig tart, and your brain is busy trying to identify what's wrapped in that grape leaf. Answer: it's lentils, garlic, mint, and just enough chili to remind you you're alive. One neighbor shows off his latest invention, a pan-fried barley cake with onion, stale wine, and raisins. You bite. It's weirdly delicious. He beams. I call it oops. You nod solemnly. A culinary accident worth repeating. There's also a condiment passed around, a pungent mash of olives, anchovies, vinegar, and crushed almonds. Everyone adds a dab to their bread like it's ketchup. You do the same and instantly feel your nasal passages open up like temple doors. Good morning, indeed. A woman next to you explains that she usually saves breakfast for after the market crowds. Just a few olives, a leftover bean cake, maybe an apple. But today's a special treat. Her cousin is in town from Thessalonica, which apparently requires at least 3 kinds of cheese and something pickled. There's a jar of fermented turnips passed around. You're told not to smell it. You do. You regret it. But when you eat it with barley bread and a bit of honey, something strange happens. It balances. Earth, salt, sour, sweet. Byzantines didn't have the term umami, but they definitely chased it. One quirky record tells of a bricklayer who swore by a morning meal of soaked lentils mixed with river sand for tooth sharpening. Whether this was metaphorical or an actual recipe remains hotly debated and mildly horrifying. The child who was flicking seeds at chickens now offers you a bite of his breakfast. Cold roasted carrot dipped in yogurt with mint. You smile and accept, because it's clearly his finest offering, and because, honestly, it's not bad. This breakfast isn't built for ceremony. It's built to fuel a life that starts before sunrise and doesn't end until every pot is scrubbed, every brick laid, every sheep returned. Yet despite its utilitarian nature, it holds a kind of rugged dignity. These people don't eat to impress. They eat to endure. One man tells you his father never ate in the mornings, claimed it slowed his reflexes. He was a wrestler, the man adds. Professionally, you ask. Mostly in taverns, he replies. You laugh, mouth full of lentils, and realize something. This isn't a lesser version of Byzantium's grander meals. It's the baseline. The bread and oil heartbeat that kept everything else running. The quiet feast that says, we've got work to do, but first, fuel up. As you leave, someone hands you a scrap of flatbread wrapped around a sweetened walnut paste. For later, they say. You tuck it away, a soft little blessing for the road ahead. Out in the street, the sun climbs higher, and the day leans toward heat. But you carry the warmth of that courtyard with you. Proof that even in the humblest corners, breakfast was a language of care. The pastry is still warm in your hand as you wander farther into the city's maze. Constantinople's side streets now pulsing with the clatter of hooves, sandal slap, and the occasional shout from a fishmonger already in full operatic form. But your next stop is quieter, narrower. You duck through a humble archway into a neighborhood courtyard strung with laundry, shaded by olive trees, and very much alive with the smells of frying oil and yesterday's gossip. Here, you'll sample a breakfast less grand, less orchestrated, but no less vital. This is the domain of laborers, craftspeople, dockhands, widows, scribes for hire. The working-class Byzantines. People who don't have time for six herbs or philosophical debates about leeks. People who eat with their hands and get on with their day. A family waves you in without fuss. A father sharpening a knife. A mother stirring something thick and golden in a copper pan. A child flicking seeds at a very patient chicken. You're handed a piece of barley bread straight from the hearth, smoky on the edges and still soft in the center. It's denser than anything you've had so far, as if it's bracing you for whatever awful task lies ahead, like hauling bricks or arguing with tax collectors. On the table sits a bowl of trigonos, cracked wheat boiled into a thick mush and dressed simply with olive oil, vinegar, and shredded greens. Kale, chard, dandelion. No one here uses a label maker. You spoon some into your mouth. It tastes like survival, earthy, tangy, slightly bitter, but it warms you all the way down. A little rough around the edges, maybe, but honest. Mainstream accounts often overlook the ingenuity of these modest meals, focusing instead on palace feasts and monks with 9 herb gardens. But this is where the majority lived, cooked, and made their mornings count. You watch as a neighbor tosses thin slices of salted mullet into a pan slick with olive oil and garlic. The fish hisses its complaints, but crisps beautifully. Breakfast fish, less fancy than it sounds. More like a necessary protein bump before hauling amphory or chiseling marble all day. Historians still argue whether working-class Byzantines generally ate twice a day or grazed constantly on small, prepared items. Some suggest urban dwellers relied heavily on street food stands offering morning bites, cheese rolls, stuffed grape leaves, or fried chickpea patties. Others point to archaeological finds of small household braziers and storage jars as evidence of robust home cooking, even in cramped quarters. A boy appears with a small clay cup of pasca, diluted vinegar water. It's shockingly refreshing. You're told it clears the eyes and keeps the brain sharp, although your eyes are still blurry from the fig tart, and your brain is busy trying to identify what's wrapped in that grape leaf. Answer: it's lentils, garlic, mint, and just enough chili to remind you you're alive. One neighbor shows off his latest invention, a pan-fried barley cake with onion, stale wine, and raisins. You bite. It's weirdly delicious. He beams. I call it oops. You nod solemnly. A culinary accident worth repeating. There's also a condiment passed around, a pungent mash of olives, anchovies, vinegar, and crushed almonds. Everyone adds a dab to their bread like it's ketchup. You do the same and instantly feel your nasal passages open up like temple doors. Good morning, indeed. A woman next to you explains that she usually saves breakfast for after the market crowds. Just a few olives, a leftover bean cake, maybe an apple. But today's a special treat. Her cousin is in town from Thessalonica, which apparently requires at least 3 kinds of cheese and something pickled. There's a jar of fermented turnips passed around. You're told not to smell it. You do. You regret it. But when you eat it with barley bread and a bit of honey, something strange happens. It balances. Earth, salt, sour, sweet. Byzantines didn't have the term umami, but they definitely chased it. One quirky record tells of a bricklayer who swore by a morning meal of soaked lentils mixed with river sand for tooth sharpening. Whether this was metaphorical or an actual recipe remains hotly debated and mildly horrifying. The child who was flicking seeds at chickens now offers you a bite of his breakfast. Cold roasted carrot dipped in yogurt with mint. You smile and accept, because it's clearly his finest offering, and because, honestly, it's not bad. This breakfast isn't built for ceremony. It's built to fuel a life that starts before sunrise and doesn't end until every pot is scrubbed, every brick laid, every sheep returned. Yet despite its utilitarian nature, it holds a kind of rugged dignity. These people don't eat to impress. They eat to endure. One man tells you his father never ate in the mornings, claimed it slowed his reflexes. He was a wrestler, the man adds. Professionally, you ask. Mostly in taverns, he replies. You laugh, mouth full of lentils, and realize something. This isn't a lesser version of Byzantium's grander meals. It's the baseline. The bread and oil heartbeat that kept everything else running. The quiet feast that says, we've got work to do, but first, fuel up. As you leave, someone hands you a scrap of flatbread wrapped around a sweetened walnut paste. For later, they say. You tuck it away, a soft little blessing for the road ahead. Out in the street, the sun climbs higher, and the day leans toward heat. But you carry the warmth of that courtyard with you. Proof that even in the humblest corners, breakfast was a language of care. You brush the last sesame seeds from your robe and turn away from the market, heading toward the hills that roll just outside the city's bustling center. Your sandals crunch over gravel and crushed olive pits as you climb a narrow path toward a small monastery perched above the Bosphorus. The monks here keep to themselves, speaking little, praying often, and, crucially, eating breakfast with a kind of divine regularity that borders on obsession. You're not sure if you're supposed to be here. But a donkey nods you along, and a novice in sandals 2 sizes too big offers a silent wave. Good enough. Inside the courtyard, the rhythm slows. There's a hush here, like the walls are lined with silence itself. Still, there's movement. 2 monks washing herbs in a stone basin, another grinding something with a mortar and pestle that looks older than sin. You follow the smell of something nutty and toasted, perhaps spelt porridge again, but this version is rich with almond milk, sweetened with grape must, and finished with a scrape of dried orange peel. A monk ladles some into a wooden bowl and places it before you with the quiet solemnity of someone offering last rites. You accept it like a blessing and eat. The texture is smooth but hearty, the sweetness gentle, the citrus lifting it just slightly above monk-tier beige. You feel your shoulders drop, your jaw unclench. This porridge is therapy. Mainstream sources often romanticize the monastic diet as hyper-restrictive and joyless. But archaeological finds and preserved texts reveal surprising variety and inventiveness, particularly at breakfast. Grains were central, yes, but monks used herbs like marjoram and anise, nuts, and dried fruit to create flavors both subtle and deeply comforting. Everything was measured, intentional, contemplative, even the bread. You're handed a slice now. It's dark, chewy, flecked with rosemary and something else. Maybe fennel seed or the wisdom of 10 lifetimes. You take a bite and immediately want to light a candle and confess something vague. Historians still argue whether these meals were truly frugal or simply modest in appearance. Some suggest that elite monasteries, flush with land donations and imperial favor, had surprisingly lavish kitchens behind closed doors. Others claim any extra luxury was saved for feast days and visiting dignitaries, not wandering breakfast tourists like yourself. Either way, what you're eating feels sacred, and not in a showy, gold leaf on toast way. Sacred like quiet mornings and old recipes and food that doesn't try to impress you, only to nourish you. A monk appears with a small dish of what looks like yogurt but is sharper, thinner, and served with a spoon carved from olive wood. Beside it, dried figs, cracked open and stuffed with crushed walnuts and cinnamon. You taste one and forget your name for several seconds. One particularly proud novice brings over something wrapped in fig leaves and warmed by the hearth. Inside is a paste made of lentils, dates, pine nuts, and, unexpectedly, rose petals. He beams at you like he's just reinvented fire. You chew slowly and nod. It's floral, earthy, oddly soothing. One scroll from the monastery's archive refers to a breakfast poultice of mashed chickpeas and vinegar used to warm the belly and clarify the tongue. You ask about it. A monk brings it out in a ceramic cup and gestures for you to try. You sip cautiously. It's pungent, like someone pickled a cloud. But it leaves you with a curious clarity, like mint tea and thunder. A soft bell rings across the courtyard. Time for mid-morning prayers. You watch as the monks file toward the chapel in their sand-colored robes, each one pausing to wash his hands with rosewater before entering. The breakfast dishes are left in neat stacks by the fountain, already half scrubbed. Cleanliness, here, is part of the ritual. You linger a moment longer, absorbing the silence, the bird song, the citrus tang still clinging to your palate. Then you rise, nod to the donkey who first welcomed you, and slip away down the hill, your steps slower, your spirit steadier. The monastery disappears behind you like a dream half-remembered. But you carry its breakfast with you, not just in your stomach, but in your bones. Come. Steady. A reminder that not all nourishment comes in a hurry, and that sometimes the best meals are the ones whispered rather than shouted. As you reach the road again, the city noise rushes back. But you're different now. You've had porridge blessed by silence itself. And if that's not a solid foundation for the rest of your day, what is? Back on the city's edge, the sun now firmly overhead, you wipe a bit of almond milk from your sleeve and rejoin the urban sprawl. But instead of returning to the busy harbor, you meander east, toward a neighborhood nestled beneath a crumbling aqueduct. This district doesn't appear on tourist maps or in any dazzling fresco. But if you're hungry for forgotten breakfasts, the kind passed down in kitchens, not courts, this is the place. You slip through an alleyway where vines crawl up sun-bleached walls, and the scent of cardamom dances past your nose. This is where the merchant families live, not the richest ones, mind you, but the ones with cousins in Armenia, spice deals in Egypt, and gossip in every language. You tap at a modest doorway, already ajar, and are greeted by a woman in her middle years, wearing a robe that might have once been white. She smiles, shrugs, and waves you inside. You're not the first straggler to arrive, judging by the scattered slippers and half-finished breakfast trays. A low table holds a spread that's equal parts improvisation and culinary genius. You're handed a flatbread still warm from a stone oven, then pointed toward a dish that looks like scrambled eggs but shimmers with unexpected color. This, you're told, is ega, eggs beaten with milk, saffron, crushed dill, and often whatever greens were still alive in the garden. It's fluffy and fragrant, and unlike anything that comes out of a breakfast buffet in a modern hotel. One bite, and your eyebrows ascend toward heaven. There's a salty paste made of fish roe, garlic, and lemon juice, spread thickly on cooled barley cakes. A carafe holds watered wine spiced with cinnamon and cloves, served warm. For circulation, someone says. You nod as if you regularly diagnose yourself with humoral imbalance. Mainstream Byzantine histories rarely discuss domestic breakfasts beyond monasteries and palaces. But records from court scribes, household inventories, and even love letters suggest a very different world behind private doors, one of variety, regional fusion, and the steady influence of trade routes. You reach for a dish of dates stuffed with crushed pistachio and spiced lamb, something both sweet and savory, chewy and rich. A local specialty, someone notes, adapted from Syrian travelers. Historians still argue whether such breakfasts were everyday affairs or reserved for hosting guests. But either way, they reflect a layered cultural life that textbooks often smooth over. A child offers you a clay cup of yogurt mixed with cucumber and spearmint. It's creamy and cool, and tastes like someone air-conditioned your mouth. You sip gratefully. Breakfast, here, is not a quick affair. It's more of a parade, a mosaic in motion. Across the table, a grandmother slathers quince jam onto a biscuit-like round made of chickpea flour and sesame. You copy her, and your mouth lights up with tart, nutty joy. She chuckles at your wide-eyed expression. "We only eat this in the spring," she says. "Too joyful for winter." You find yourself wondering what joy tastes like in December. But that's another episode. On a back shelf, jars line the wall, honey thick as molasses, preserved cherries glowing like rubies, a mystery paste that looks like it might have a personality. One woman spoons it onto your plate. "Olive paste," she says. "My mother's recipe." She added rosemary and dried orange rind. You take a bite and immediately taste a different region, a different era, a different breakfast entirely. You begin to notice how many flavors here seem designed to wake the senses. Tang, spice, herb, salt, and just enough sweetness to keep things playful. One quirky recipe involves soaking lentils overnight in vinegar and rose water, then mashing them into cakes and frying them with dates. You try a piece, dense, savory, with a haunting hint of floral. It tastes like poetry left out in the rain. The family dog wanders by and sniffs your ankle with disinterest, clearly accustomed to a steady stream of breakfast pilgrims. You slip him a bit of chickpea biscuit. He accepts it like tribute. Outside the window, you can see a woman hanging herbs to dry on a line. Mint, bay, something that smells faintly of black pepper and mystery. She waves down to the table. The cook waves back, and someone jokes that you've now eaten a whole garden's worth of Byzantium. You smile, because it's probably true. You finish your plate with a candied lemon peel dipped in pistachio crumbs. A final flourish. The breakfast equivalent of a mic drop. One scholar once wrote, "The true identity of an empire is whispered not by its generals but by its kitchens." Sitting here among strangers who fed you like kin, you can't help but agree. You thank your hosts, offer a bow more heartfelt than theatrical, and step outside. The city waits, buzzing and clanging and never quite sleeping. But for a moment, you've seen its softer side, where cumin meets conversation and breakfast isn't a meal, but a language. You step from the warm hush of the household and back onto the uneven streets of Constantinople, belly full and brain spinning with spice combinations you'll never be able to recreate. You head south now, toward the sea breeze, drawn by the scent of something roasting, nutty, smoky, with a trace of caramel clinging to the air like gossip. This part of the city's edge is home to artisans and dockworkers, a place where the breakfast table might be a shipping crate or a knee. No monastery bells here. Just the clank of oars, the slap of fish being gutted, and vendors who already sound exasperated despite it being barely mid-morning. You sidle up to a street stall, where a man in a linen tunic is roasting something over a flat brazier. He grins, skewers a cake-like item with a stick, and hands it to you without a word. You take a bite and nearly burn your tongue. Inside, mashed lentils, chickpea flour, cinnamon, and something sweet, grape molasses or maybe the tears of culinary joy. It's crusty on the outside, soft in the middle, and it's what breakfast would taste like if it were forged by blacksmiths. These streets fed the working class, dockhands, apprentices, brewers, bathhouse staff. Their breakfasts weren't silver-plated or herb-dusted. They were quick, hot, affordable, and designed to stick to your ribs until well past noon. Think lentil patties wrapped in cabbage leaves, spelt dumplings baked on stone slabs, and barley cakes drizzled with the last drops of garlic oil. Historical records from court scribes rarely mention this world at all. But graffiti, letters, and trade receipts tell us otherwise. A scribbled note from a disgruntled mill worker mentions bread crusts too hard to chew, soaked in wine to spare my teeth. You imagine that note, scrawled on olive bark, held in some grease-stained tunic pocket. You duck into a side alley where a widow sells sprouted grain porridge out of a dented copper pot. She ladles it into a wooden bowl, tops it with stewed leeks, and adds a final flourish, a drizzle of mint vinegar. It shouldn't work. It really shouldn't. But you take a bite, and the savory-sour combo snaps your taste buds awake like a cold splash of seawater. She offers you a second dish, salted yogurt whipped with garlic and walnuts, scooped up with yesterday's bread. It tastes like the kind of breakfast you eat while standing because there's no time to sit, and yet, somehow, you feel more alive for it. Historians still debate whether these lower-class breakfasts were mere survival fuel or expressions of inventive cuisine born from necessity. One camp argues that flavor was a luxury. The other points to the sheer variety of sauces, condiments, and preserved ingredients found in even modest homes. Maybe the answer is yes. Or maybe you'd need to eat about 12 more lentil patties to really know. At the docks, a group of sailors crouches around a pot balanced over coals. Inside, cracked wheat cooked in fish broth, thickened with dried fava beans, and sprinkled with chopped garlic greens. You're handed a cup. It tastes like ocean wind and long stories told under tarps. Next to you, a boy with a shaved head and gold earring is gnawing on a roasted onion stuffed with breadcrumbs, dried mint, and raisins. He catches you staring and offers a bite. You try it. It's weird. It's excellent. It's weirdly excellent. What strikes you most is how each stall, each alley, each household you pass adds another brushstroke to this enormous, edible mosaic. Breakfast here isn't a single tradition. It's a collision of influences. Roman habits, Persian spices, Slavic pickling, and African grains all stirred into one delicious mess of a city. You pass a baker's stall where the day's first trays of flatbread are being pulled from a wood-fired oven. He lets you tear a corner from the edge, It's hot, blistered, and sprinkled with anise seeds. As you chew, he hands over a small clay vessel of what he calls early sauce. Inside is a warm mash of lentils, cumin, leftover wine, and garlic. A humble relic of the Roman Maritim tradition, still hanging on like a vine clinging to a crumbling villa wall. You dip. You eat. You make the sound people make when they've accidentally stumbled into happiness. There's no performance here. No silver trays. No lemon wedges carved into swans. Just food meant to get you to lunchtime without cursing the gods. The dock bells ring again. Crates clatter. Someone yells in 3 languages at once. And yet, you linger with your clay cup of lentil sauce, marveling at the way even the simplest breakfasts here have layers. Flavors born of trade, conquest, weather, and thrift. Byzantine breakfasts, you realize, were like the empire itself. Complex, occasionally improvised, full of contradictions, and best enjoyed hot, with your hands. As the sun climbs higher, you take one last bite of flatbread, wipe your fingers on your tunic, and nod toward the sea. Breakfast is over. But the flavors linger like a song stuck in your head. You head uphill now, weaving through the humming streets of midday Constantinople, the city shimmering with sunlight and clamor. But you're not here for chaos. You're seeking one last breakfast, and perhaps the most elusive kind, the breakfast of memory. Not the meals etched in court documents or buried under mosaics, but those whispered between generations, passed through lullabies, or pressed into the hands of grandchildren as they rush out the door. You find yourself in a courtyard shaded by fig trees, the kind that drip fruit in the summer and memories in the fall. A matronly figure sits on a stool, slicing dried apricots into a bubbling pot over a coal brazier. She glances up, gives you the sort of smile only earned by arriving exactly when you're meant to, and motions you over. She's preparing palathai, a thick porridge of cracked wheat and dried fruit, cooked slowly in goat milk and sweetened with mulberry syrup. It's not fancy. It's not fast. But as you taste it, something inside you settles. This is not just breakfast. It's a ritual, a rhythm, a way of anchoring oneself in the relentless tides of empire. Beside her, a small boy crushes fenugreek seeds with a round stone, dropping pinches into a bowl of olive oil and lemon juice. When he's done, she tears off a piece of barley bread, dips it in the mixture, and hands it to you. It tastes earthy and sharp, like something made by people who understand both hunger and celebration. Every element of the meal carries a story. The fenugreek, a nod to Egyptian kitchens. The barley bread, still baked the same way it was in Homer's time. The mulberry syrup, a sweet souvenir from a trade route that once reached deep into Armenia. This breakfast may look quiet, but it echoes across continents. Historians still argue whether these rural-style breakfasts endured into the twilight of the Byzantine Empire or faded as city life grew louder. Some point to late medieval records describing more European meals, cheese-stuffed buns, black bread, and even salted pork. Others believe the older traditions, especially in domestic settings, clung on much longer, passed along in kitchens like this one. The woman pours you a final cup of warm barley milk, laced with cardamom and crushed sesame. It tastes like sleep, if sleep were drinkable. You help her gather the bowls, wooden, worn, and perfectly imperfect. She hums a tune, one that might be ancient or might be hers alone. A cat twirls around your ankle, purring like it knows something you don't. As you rise to go, she hands you a small cloth bundle. Inside, a piece of honey-drenched semolina cake, wrapped in fig leaves. For the road, she says, like an oracle with excellent taste. You tuck it into your satchel, nod, and begin the slow descent toward the sea. The city now glows gold. Ships sway at anchor. Bells toll. Life continues. But something in you has shifted. You've walked through time not with kings or crusaders, but with cooks, cousins, and neighbors. You've tasted the empire not through conquest, but through crumbs. And though no scholar will ever cite your stomach, it knows something that footnotes can't, that the true story of Byzantium is warm, flaky, often made with lentils, and best eaten surrounded by laughter. You make your way down a quiet road, the distant sound of looms clacking in the breeze. Someone is baking nearby. Maybe flatbread, maybe memories. You pass without disturbing them. Just one more ghost in a city built on layers of life. As your footsteps slow, the final breakfast dissolves into your senses. Herby, sweet, savory, and slow. The flavors blur. The stories meld. And the day stretches forward like a table set for one more meal. And now, with full belly and heavy eyelids, you settle into stillness. The city fades behind you, its ovens cooled, its tables cleared, and its songs echoing gently in the corners of your mind. You can still feel the warmth of fresh flatbread on your fingertips, still hear the gentle splash of barley milk being poured, still smell the soft sweetness of dates and honey carried on the morning breeze. Let it all drift now, slowly, softly, like steam rising from a quiet pot. There's nothing else you need to do. No ships to catch, no empires to worry about. Just the rhythm of breath, the steady hum of peace, and the comfort of stories well told. You've wandered through kitchens forgotten by time, stepped inside quiet homes that history almost missed, and sat at tables that may never have been recorded, but mattered all the same. These are the breakfasts no textbook will list, but your senses remember them anyway. As you lie there now, let your mind become that sunlit courtyard, fig trees above, soft bread in hand. Let the noise fade into warmth. Let the scents become dreams. You are safe. You are full. And you are exactly where you're meant to be. Sleep well, traveler of forgotten mornings.